In this lesson, we're going to discuss risk assessments in the cloud. As more businesses move their data and operations to the cloud, risk assessments become critical in identifying and addressing risks to the organization, business processes, customers, and systems. A risk assessment is a careful study that defines a response based on the likelihood of occurrence and impact of potential risk. Risks are classified, documented, and addressed through a comprehensive plan to mitigate the likelihood and impact of adverse events. In this lesson, we will discuss the key considerations of risk assessments in the cloud. Risk assessments are essential to identifying potential hazards and implementing measures to mitigate them. Conducting risk assessments involve a systematic approach that ensures potential hazards and risks are identified, and measures are put in place to manage or minimize them. The process involves 5 critical steps: identify the hazard, identify people possibly harmed, evaluate risk and mitigations, document findings, and review regularly. Step 1. Identify the hazard. The first step in conducting a risk assessment is to identify potential hazards. Hazards can be defined as anything that has potential to cause harm. Hazards may be physical, chemical, biological, or related to work procedures or practices. Identifying potential hazards is the foundation for the rest of the risk assessment process, and it should be done systematically. Step 2. Identify people possibly harmed. After identifying potential hazards, the next step is to identify the people who may be affected by these hazards. The people affected may include employees, customers, or anyone else who may be exposed to the hazard. The identification of people potentially harmed helps to ensure that the assessment considers all the possible scenarios. Step 3. Evaluate risk and mitigations. Once potential hazards and people affected have been identified, the next step is to evaluate the risk and determine appropriate mitigation strategies. The evaluation of risk involves considering the likelihood of a hazard causing harm and the severity of the harm that may result. This evaluation helps to prioritize the potential hazards and focus on the ones with the highest risk. Mitigation strategies may include removing the hazard, implementing control measures, or providing training to employees on how to manage or avoid it. Step 4. Document findings. After evaluating risk and determining appropriate mitigation strategies, the next step is to document the findings of the risk assessment. Documentation helps to ensure that all the findings are captured and can be used for future reference. The documentation should include the hazards identified, the people affected, the risk identified, and the mitigation strategies recommended. Step 5. Review regularly. The final step in conducting a risk assessment is to review the assessment regularly. Risk and hazards change over time, and it is essential to keep the risk assessment up to date. Regular review of the assessment helps to ensure that new hazards are identified and mitigation strategies are updated to reflect changes in technology or the environment. Risk classification is a critical aspect of risk assessments, as it makes it easier for organizations to address and identify risk. Risks can be classified based on several categories, including likelihood, impact, cost, response, etc. Some risks may be considered low priority if they are unlikely to occur or will have a minimal impact. Others may be considered high priority if they are very likely or would have a significant impact. Proper risk classification enables businesses to prioritize and address the most critical risks efficiently. Another important aspect of risk assessments is identifying your assets to better understand your current risk posture by maintaining an inventory of cloud resources and addressing potential risks. Unknown cloud resources can result in additional costs and security risks. Cloud resources that are deployed and then are not maintained may contain misconfigurations or other settings that violate industry standards or put the business at unnecessary risk. A cloud-based asset inventory is just as important as inventory of physical resources, as businesses can't protect what they don't know about. Next, we have data ownership. Data ownership is one of the significant risks associated with cloud computing. There is a risk of loss of ownership or control of data in the cloud service provider. For example, social media sites may own data that's posted on them, including photos, personal information, communications, etc. This data may potentially be deleted or shared by the site, depending on the end user agreement. Many businesses use social media platforms as part of their customer interaction strategies. Proper risk assessments must identify and address data ownership risks to ensure that businesses maintain ownership and control of their data in the cloud. It is also important to consider compliance and regulatory risks. After all, businesses must comply with various regulations and standards to protect customer data, financial information, and intellectual property. Cloud computing introduces new compliance and regulatory risks, as businesses must ensure that their cloud service providers comply with the relevant regulations and standards. Risks associated with compliance and regulation must be addressed in the risk assessment, and businesses must ensure that they have a comprehensive plan to comply with the relevant regulations and standards. Finally, we need to talk about vendor lock-in, which is yet another risk associated with cloud computing. Businesses may be relying on a particular cloud service provider, making it challenging to switch to another provider. Vendor lock-in may result in additional costs and security risk. Proper risk assessments must identify and address vendor lock-in risk, ensuring that businesses have the flexibility to switch to another provider if necessary. So remember, risk assessments are a critical aspect of cloud computing, enabling businesses to identify and address potential risks to their organization, business processes, customers, and systems. Risks may be classified, documented, and addressed through a comprehensive plan to mitigate the likelihood and impact of adverse events. Proper risk assessments must consider the key considerations discussed in this lesson, including risk classification, asset inventory, data ownership, compliance and regulatory risk, and vendor lock-in risk. By properly addressing these considerations, businesses can mitigate the risks associated with cloud computing and leverage its benefits effectively.